The first perspective is when I was the governor of the Central Bank of Pakistan, and the perspective of having led the financial response in two previous crises. One in 2019, we had a big balance of payments crisis, and then the COVID crisis. And in neither of those crises did these questions about whether we're going to default ever come like they are coming right now. That lens, and then the other lens, before I joined the State Bank of Pakistan, when I used to be the IMF, and before I resigned from the IMF to come back and do public service, for 4 years I was the head of the IMF's division that's in charge of debt restructuring. So that's the division that makes the IMF's policies, and the IMF is a key player. So in response to your question, whether Pakistan is going to default, I want to make 3 points for you. And the first point is that when I look at the developments over the last several months, today, I am more concerned than I was before, and I always try to be very careful whenever I do any public communication on this issue. And to me, it comes down to the following, that if you are a person or a company or a country that is having problems meeting its obligations, and you believe that you just need some temporary additional financial support from the international community to get you over, then it's incumbent upon you as the first step to make sure that you have a constructive relationship with whoever it is in the international community that is going to give you a bit more financial support to get you over what you consider a temporary hardship. The reason I'm concerned is that our relationship with the international financial community has not improved over these past few months. And this is the only entity led by the IMF that could give us that temporary additional support. And this deterioration comes both in terms of substance and in terms of communication. You all would have seen what the IMF has said about the recent budget that has been presented. So it seems there's a difference on substance, on policies. And then you all would have seen how the international financial community led by the IMF is characterized in the media as well. So that's my first point, that if we wanted and if we want to avoid default, we have to have a constructive relationship with those who may be there to give us a bit more breathing room. But it looks like that is not where it's headed, and we are only hurting ourselves. My second point is, suppose there is default, and I'm not taking a view, and I'm sorry to not answer. For Pakistan, given the structure of our debt, it's going to be a very, very protracted, painful process that is not going to end up in a position where our debt to GDP ratio is actually going to come down. The reason for that is the following. According to the last published IMF staff report that was in September 2022, our total debt is around $275 billion as of the end of June 2021, which is the last IMF published figure. Of that $275 billion, $175 billion is domestic debt that is owed to Pakistanis through banks or through national savings certificates. And about $85 billion is external debt owed to official creditors, multilaterals and bilateral official creditors. This comes to $260 billion of the 275. Both of these are types of debt where it is very unlikely to get a debt reduction. It's very unlikely to get debt relief. Most you can get is a postponement of some of your payments. That postponement does not reduce your debt to GDP ratio. So if Pakistan were to default, we would go through a very painful process. We would go through a protracted process, and we would end up, my fear is, with the same debt to GDP ratio as we have right now, because 95% of your creditors are the type where debt reduction is not really feasible. My last point then, my first being, it seems people are a lot more concerned now about this than a few months ago. My second being that if there is default, the process is going to be very complicated. It's not going to bring us to any place better necessarily. And my last point, but is that there is still hope. And the reason I say that is because I was fortunate to be at the State Bank during the COVID crisis, and that was a much worse crisis. If we could come out of that we can come out of this as well. We need to address these particular reasons that have brought us to where we are, and we need to have some conviction that I fear we are losing. And that conviction and that belief in ourselves that by correcting our course, we can avoid default is what is needed. So let me stop there.